The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "To you who hear, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. To the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other one as well. And from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold even your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. If you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather, love your enemies and do good to them, and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given to you. A good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing, will be poured into your lap. For the measure with which you measure, in return will be measured out to you." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
What is the difference between how a Christian acts and how an atheist acts? Sounds like a dumb question at first. There should be a huge difference in how we act, right? But I'm here to tell you, being an atheist doesn't mean that you're an inherently evil person. A lot of atheists try to be good. A lot of atheists try to do good. There are many atheists who have many of the same values as us Catholics. For example, there are many atheists who are pro-life. They oppose abortion. There are atheists who even oppose artificial birth control, as the church does. They might not be motivated by faith, but they are motivated by love for their fellow human being. You may have heard of a popular atheist slogan that comes up around Christmas time, and they'd say, "Just be good for goodness sake," from the Christmas song. And in other words, what they're saying is you don't need religion to be good. What's the point of religion? You can just choose good yourself. Just be good for goodness sake. And that's a very attractive, and it's a very logical way of thinking. Why do so many young people leave the church? It's because being good, even without Jesus Christ, is a rewarding way to live. It makes you feel good. You do good. And others appreciate you for it. So, the question, once again, what is the difference between how a Christian acts and how an atheist acts? And Jesus points that difference out in today's gospel. The answer is forgiveness. Now, I'm not saying that an atheist is unable to forgive, but what I am saying is that Christians, we're called in a special way by Jesus to live out our entire life with a tone of mercy, with a tone of forgiveness. Jesus' message throughout the entire gospel is to forgive Israel's enemies. One of the most radical things that Jesus does is that he reveals to us that God is not out to crush God's enemies. He isn't about vengeance. The Messiah that God sends is not a conquering hero. And the people of Jesus' time didn't understand that. They refused to understand that. And so that's why, to me, the thing that makes Christians different is that we're called, it is to be a part of our faith to turn the other cheek. It is a part of our faith to forgive rather than to seek retribution. And most people who are not Christians, including atheists and everybody else, they think that that's sort of a silly way to live. If you don't seek justice, then you'll be trampled on like a doormat. People need to be punished for their crimes, but that's not what our faith requires of us. Today's readings remind us that one of the simplest commandments of our Lord is also one of the hardest, and that is to love your enemies. And loving your enemies means getting rid of anger and living a life of forgiveness, which isn't easy. But we've got examples today in our readings. In the first reading, David, who isn't King David yet, he's just David. He's being pursued by King Saul and King Saul's army because Saul is jealous of David because he knows that eventually he will replace him as king. But David and his men, they come across Saul's camp while they're sleeping, and he easily sneaks up to King Saul himself. And David's servant, Abishai, tells him to kill him while he's defenseless, to nail his head to the ground. But David chooses to have mercy. He instead leaves Saul's fate up to God. And instead he steals Saul's spear and his water jug, and even though he has every right to boast and to gloat, he begs Saul just to understand that he means him no harm. And David knew, and in this instance he teaches us that if we seek justice, we have to remember that it's God's job to carry it out and not ours. If David wished no harm to come to King Saul out of respect, well, Jesus tells us to go even further, actually, to love our enemies. Jesus suffered beatings and scourging, spitting, and ridicule, and he didn't respond in the same way. He was stripped of his clothing and his life was taken from him, and he didn't retaliate. Instead, Jesus says that we should love those who hate us. Instead, he says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And that's the difference between how a Christian acts and how an atheist acts. That's what we see in the gospel, where Jesus says, even sinners forgive those that they love. But I say to you, forgive those who hate you. There is little difference in the good that a religious and a non-religious person desire, or the people that they desire to help. The difference comes in the way that we Christians are called to react to those who do us wrong. For an atheist, it's a matter of justice. Those who do wrong must be punished. They must be defeated. Bad people ought to get what's coming to them. But for a Christian, we have to see things completely differently, or otherwise we're simply atheists that go to church. We need to see things from God's perspective, from the perspective of the fact that every single person, all of them, good, bad, evil, or indifferent, they're all made in God's image. All of them, from the most pious of saints to the sickest of sinners, is worth loving because they bear God's image. For us Christians, it's not a matter of justice, it's a matter of mercy. And being merciful doesn't come easily to human beings. We all suffer from the same effects of original sin. And let's be honest, it feels really, really good when people get what's coming to them. I mean, every story, every book, every movie that has a happy ending sees the bad guy getting defeated and the good guys win. But Jesus tells us that it's not about winning or losing. It's about love. And that love even applies to your enemies. Let me be clear. Am I saying that we shouldn't care if evil happens in the world? Am I saying that we shouldn't be outraged by injustice? Am I saying that we should allow evil to keep occurring? No, none of that. Evil must be opposed. We must stand for truth. But what I'm saying is this, that it is not our job to judge individuals. It is God's. About a decade ago, I was watching a Philadelphia Phillies playoff baseball game. I went to the seminary in Philadelphia, and so I followed them for a while until they got bad again. But I was watching them play in the playoffs, and watching the game on TV, the crowd suddenly started cheering or chanting USA, USA, and I was like, what the heck's going on? And then a minute or two later, President Obama came on TV and he told us that Osama bin Laden had been captured and killed by U.S. Navy SEALs. And I began to think about that chant, USA, USA, and the more I thought about it, the more it made me feel sick. Yeah, they might have been cheering for justice. The bad guy lost. A man who had hate in his heart, a man who thought he knew God. They were cheering for his defeat. And then I thought, they're also cheering for death, for his death. And The reason that you never see pictures of the capture of Osama bin Laden is because his body was so abused and humiliated and riddled with bullets from our soldiers that it wasn't ever shown to the public. Love your enemies. USA. And don't get me wrong, I don't feel bad for Osama bin Laden. I felt bad for us, for our nation, for how unchristian that was. What would Jesus say to an entire nation cheering for the death of a sinner? Well, we can go to the Bible. You can't go more than a few verses without getting to his answer to those questions. Matthew 5:44, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:39, when someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one to him as well. Matthew 5:40, if anyone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, hand him your cloak as well. Matthew 5:41, should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go with him for 2 miles. Matthew 5:22, Moses said, thou shalt not kill, but I say to you, anyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Matthew 6:14, if you forgive others their offenses, your heavenly Father will forgive you as well. Luke 6:37, stop judging and you will not be judged. Stop condemning and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Matthew 5:7, blessed are the merciful, for mercy shall be theirs. Luke 6:36, be merciful, just as your Father in heaven is merciful. Luke 6:35, lend, expecting nothing in return. Luke 6:28, bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. John 8:7, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Matthew 7:5, remove the wooden beam from your eye first, and then you will see clearly to remove the splinter from your brother's eye. Matthew 5:23, if you bring your gift to the altar and there recall that your brother has done anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar, go first and be reconciled with your brother, and then come offer your gift. John 13:34, love one another as I have loved you. And those were just the ones that came off the top of my head. How does God love us? He loves us by dying for us. And Jesus didn't only die for the holy. He died for us all. He died for the people who hate him, for the people that mock and ridicule him and reject him. He died for the worst that humanity has to offer, in the hopes that some of them might be saved. Am I saying that we should all seek out being abused? No, because then we wouldn't be loving ourselves. But what I am saying is that vengeance and payback and a desire to see people fail or people hurt, it should not be something that we crave. Judging the state of someone else's soul is not something we should be in the business of doing. You can point to someone's actions and say that those actions are wrong, but you can't condemn that person to hell. Our words ought to be the same as Jesus to the woman caught in adultery. I have not condemned you. Go and sin no more. Acknowledge the sin, rebuke the sin, but love the sinner. Lent starts in 10 days, so start thinking about that and what you'll do for Lent. And perhaps we should make it a goal to change our attitude towards our enemies, to try to put some of what I have said into practice, to turn off the sources of information that take us away from mercy. You won't find mercy on cable news or on most places in the internet. Instead, turn your heart to your neighbor, to the neighbor who you don't get along with, to your neighbor who might even hate you, to the family member who has hurt you. Turn your heart to the person who would like to see you fail. Turn your heart to those who wish to tear the church down. Turn your heart to the person who has a different idea than you about culture, about sexuality, about gender, the person who has a different idea about politics or society or color or race or equality. Turn your heart to the people that hate your values, the people that hate our country. Turn your heart to the criminal who has done horrible things. Turn your heart to the addict, the homeless, the mentally ill. Turn your hearts to the person who disagrees with your values, your way of life. Turn your heart to the person who will never see eye to eye with you. Turn your heart to the people that you gossip about or the people that gossip about you. Turn your heart to the people who have hurt you or someone that you love. Turn your heart to the person who you will never in a million years agree with, to the people that you will never understand, to the people who will never understand you. Think of the people who have done you wrong. Think of the people you can't stand. Think of the people that you hate. I'm not asking you to approve of someone else's sin. I'm not asking you to feel good about all the people that I just mentioned. And I'm not even asking you to forgive them. I'm only asking that you pray that God will have mercy on them all. And in doing so, he might have mercy on us.